Mahogany wood is the worst to paint. Only days after painting it white, there were pink stains showing up. Now, years later, I'm gonna fix it. I removed the old hardware and the hinges from the doors, but the hinges on one side wouldn't come off due to stripped screws, so we left them on and taped them off. Important when removing doors and hinges especially, label all hinges, the direction they go, and where they go. Label the screws as well. It will make it so much easier to put together and helps the doors work properly when you put them back on. I also took off the back of the buffet so I could easily get inside the buffet as I worked. It was already part of the way it popped off, so it was really easy to pop it off with the help of a flathead screwdriver and definitely some work gloves so I didn't get a sliver. My little kids constantly touch this buffet that we used as a TV stand, so there was a lot of gunk on it. So I scrubbed the gunk off of the paint with crud cutter and an old damp rag, and for extra stubborn areas, I attached these drill brush attachments to my drill to give it a good scrub. This all helps the paint stick better and makes the new paint finish look so much better. Man, oh man, that buffet looks so much better after good scrub down. Before repainting, it's also super important to sand the old paint at least a little bit. This piece, there were many dings and chips in the paint, and if I hadn't sanded them down smooth, you would have still seen the outline of those chips. So I sanded everything with 120 grit sandpaper and medium grit foam pads, and my trusty Surf Prep sander. I focused specifically on the chipped paint areas, but I also sanded everything to help the new paint stick to the old paint. The base of the buffet was covered in chips, so I scraped off the old paint and then I sanded it smooth to get it down to raw wood. I figured the kids might still ram their toys into the base of the buffet, so I want it to be as durable as possible here. While sanding, I spotted a few pieces of chipped wood that needed filled, so I filled them in with plastic wood filler, and I also filled the old hardware holes in the drawers with quick wood so I could replace the hardware with new holes. I also filled the hole in the middle cabinet door that isn't really a door, so it doesn't need a knob. The next day, it was all dry, so I sanded the filler all flush with the wood around it. Then I was able to remove the dust with a shop vac and brush attachment and wipe clean with a tack cloth to remove every little bit of dust. Otherwise, the dust will make the paint feel and look textured. One last thing before I got any paint out, I taped all the drawers off with pre-taped plastic to prevent any spray paint from getting inside the drawers. Finally, it's time to paint. I primed with bin shellac primer to block bleed-through stains from coming through the areas where raw wood is showing. But also, this buffet is mahogany wood, which is some of the worst wood to paint because of the bleed-through. Anytime you paint wood, though, there are most likely going to be bleed-through stains where you can see yellow, brown, or pink stains coming through the paint. Mahogany has pink stains that come through the paint, and even though I primed really well when I first painted it, some areas still had a little bit of pink coming through, so I wanted to make sure to block that before painting again. I brushed and rolled the bin shellac primer onto the buffet with a zebra pointed brown brush and mohair roller. Another great primer alternative is clear shellac in the aerosol can. It's easy to spray on, it dries smooth, and it blocks stains and helps paint stick as well. Then I let the primer dry overnight, and I applied 2 coats to completely block the stains from coming through. I cleaned my zebra paintbrush with ammonia and a water mixture immediately after use to completely clean out the shellac out of the brush before I ruined it. Now, if you're OCD like me, this step will make the paint look and feel so much better. I lightly sanded the primer smooth with fine grit sanding screens to remove the texture. Don't sand through the primer if at all possible, which is pretty impossible. Remove the dust again with a vacuum and tack cloth before moving on. Wherever we accidentally sanded through the primer, we sprayed a thin coat of clear shellac so I don't have to sand again. Let dry overnight again for the best stain blocking ability. And then I used paintable caulk to fill in the cracks and seams on the doors and sides of the buffet. I squeezed it onto the crack, wiped my finger over it to push it in, and then used a damp cloth to wipe off the excess. Okay, now it's time for painting. For this makeover, I used Sherwin-Williams Emerald Urethane Trim Enamel in the color Sommelier. Did I say that right? I love this paint because it's self-leveling, so you can brush, roll, or spray it on without a bunch of texture. I chose to spray it on with a cheap Von Forn paint sprayer from Amazon. I love that thing. I ran the paint through a filter before putting it into the sprayer's container, and then I thinned the paint with about 20% water. I sprayed on 2 to 3 thin coats of paint, letting it dry for 4 hours between coats. And I like to cover my painting tools with plastic between coats and clean things out if it's sitting overnight. Once again, my OCD is showing here. It especially comes out anytime I'm keeping the furniture for myself. Between coats of paint, I sanded the buffet with 400 grit sandpaper by hand to remove any rough spots from the overspray landing onto the buffet. Then I cleaned up the dust again. The great thing about this paint is that you do not have to top coat it. Let the paint dry for at least 24 hours before putting the hardware on and putting everything back together. I put the back of the buffet back on, put some new staples in to secure it better than it was before, and thankfully the doors went back on perfectly smooth, thanks to labeling the hinges so I could put them on correctly. It is always nail biting when putting doors back on because you never know if they're going to go back on right or not. And then I bought new cabinet pulls and knobs from Lowe's, drilled new holes on the drawers with the help of a Craig hardware jig, and put new champagne brass hardware on the buffet. Here's what it looked like before, and here's what it looks like now. Isn't it so pretty with this deep burgundy color? I love the champagne brass hardware against the deep color, and I cannot wait to keep using this buffet as our TV stand. And now I don't have to worry about the pink stains from the wood ruining my paint. It's red already! Anyway, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons to see more of our videos. Want to turn your hobby into cash? Click the link in my comments to download the free pricing guide that we use to buy and sell furniture.